My name is Sarah, and when I was 28, my family left me behind like I was luggage. They didn't want to carry anymore. We were on a summer camping trip all crammed into two SUVs, headed toward some remote stretch of woods in Oregon. I had packed the food, loaded the gear, double checked the maps, and still I was the one they decided could be left behind. It happened on day 3. We pulled into a rest stop, dusty quiet tucked between tall pine trees, and a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at. I told them I was running to the restroom. Nobody really looked at me. When I came back, the cars were gone. At first, I stood still, blinking against the sun, thinking maybe they had just moved to another part of the lot. I checked behind the building. I walked up and down the gravel edge of the highway, calling out a few names, half laughing, like it might be some stupid prank. That's when I saw it. A folded piece of paper taped to the wooden bench, curling slightly at the edges in the wind. The handwriting was my sister's, loopy practice familiar. Let's see if she finds her way out. My legs gave out before the panic even hit. I sat on the bench and just stared at that note. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I wasn't scared, not exactly. I felt nothing. Like a switch had flipped and all the power was gone. The only thing that hummed in my chest was the memory of their laughter echoing in the air like they were still nearby. We were a family of 5. My mother Cheryl, her second husband Tom, my half-sister Alexis, and my cousin Ethan, who lived with us on and off since his parents split. They were all in those cars. All of them decided I wasn't worth bringing along. All of them thought this was funny. I checked my phone. No service, no missed calls, no goodbye. I walked back to the restroom, checked the stalls, touched the cracked mirror with the tip of my finger. My reflection looked back at me like it didn't recognize who it belonged to. I opened my backpack. A bottle of water, 2 granola bars, a phone charger. I always packed like a mom, the reliable one, the one who remembered things. I guess I just never remembered to protect myself. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat down next to that note and watched the sun dip lower behind the trees. The air got colder and the shadows grew longer. Still no sign of them. Still no headlights, no apology, no joke reveal. I started to understand that this wasn't temporary, that they really did leave. What hurt more than being abandoned was realizing it had probably been planned. You don't forget a person by accident. You don't leave a rest stop without counting heads unless you want to. And I think that's what broke me. Not just the leaving, the deliberateness of it. The way they smiled at dinner the night before. The way my sister rolled her eyes when I asked if we were bringing enough water. Like it was always going to end this way. The light faded. My water bottle was half empty. I wrapped my hoodie tighter around my arms and tried to stay calm. But inside I wasn't calm. I was unraveling thread by thread in the quiet of that empty highway. And the worst part? Some small part of me still hoped they'd turn around. That maybe Alexis would text me some dumb emoji and say just kidding. That someone would come running down the road, breathless, guilty, calling my name. But they didn't. They never did. I used to think if I stayed quiet enough, they'd finally notice me. That if I folded myself small, kept the house clean, got good grades, didn't ask for too much, maybe one day, they'd look at me the way they looked at Alexis. But I learned pretty early that being helpful wasn't the same as being loved. My mom, Cheryl, always said I was a serious child. She meant it like an accusation. I didn't laugh loud enough. I didn't sparkle. Alexis did. Alexis was a firework even when she was mean, especially when she was mean. She was my mother's favorite by a mile. Even though she was younger, it felt like she ran the whole house. I did the chores, took care of the dog, made dinner on nights. Cheryl didn't feel like getting up from the couch. Alexis posted makeup tutorials in the hallway mirror and got likes from strangers who thought she was brave and funny. Tom, my stepdad, didn't say much to me unless something needed fixing. He called me a workhorse like it was a compliment. I never felt like his kid. I felt like a leftover from a meal he hadn't ordered. The first time Alexis used me in one of her videos, I didn't even know she was filming. I was scrubbing the kitchen floor. She held the phone at an angle that made me look like I belonged there, knees on tile, hands red from bleach water. The caption said, "House Elf Energy," with a laughing emoji. I found out later when a girl from school showed me the clip on her phone and asked if I was really that sad in real life. It got over 100,000 views. People commented like I wasn't real. One person wrote she looks like she sleeps in the pantry. Another said maybe if she smiled more, she'd get adopted. I read them all. When I showed Cheryl the video, she blinked slowly and said Alexis was just expressing herself. Then she went back to watching her show like nothing had happened. I asked if I could have it taken down. She told me not to be dramatic, that people were just having fun. That became the pattern. I'd get humiliated. Cheryl would shrug, Tom would grunt, Alexis would upload something new, and I'd clean up the mess. Sometimes I thought about running away, but I didn't have anywhere to go. My real dad died when I was little. I barely remembered his face, just that he used to sing softly when he cooked. Cheryl said he wasn't stable, that she did me a favor by finding someone like Tom. She said things got better once he came into our lives. I didn't know what better meant. Alexis had this thing where she'd pretend we were friends when the camera was on. She'd loop her arm around my shoulder and say, "We were just two sisters vibing." Then as soon as she stopped recording, she'd wipe her arm like I'd stained it. I used to think she hated me. Now I think she didn't think about me at all. Our house looked normal from the outside. 2 stories blue siding a porch swing that no one used. But inside, everything was tilted. The rules bent around Alexis. The silence wrapped around me. I had a room in the attic. It was cold in the winter and too hot in the summer, but it was mine. That's where I kept the sketchbooks I didn't show anyone. I used to draw people with soft eyes and strong arms. People who looked like they could hold you without hurting. I didn't know what to call that longing. I just knew I felt it all the time. I remember one Thanksgiving, Cheryl made a speech about family being everything. She held up her wine glass and smiled like she was in a commercial. Alexis took a selfie. Tom burped. I was clearing dishes before the meal was even over. There was always this quiet message in our house that I should be grateful, that I had a roof over my head and food on the table, that love wasn't something I needed, that obedience was enough. When people ask why I didn't speak up, why I didn't fight back, I want to tell them I did, just not in a way anyone could hear. I stayed alive, I stayed kind, I stayed hopeful even when it didn't make sense. But I didn't know then that hope needs oxygen, and in that house, every window was nailed shut. It was a Thursday night, and I was organizing the junk drawer in the kitchen, the one nobody touched unless they were desperate. I found old batteries, takeout menus, a half-melted crayon. Underneath a tangle of receipts was a photo I didn't remember ever seeing. It was faded and soft around the edges. A man with dark eyes and a kind smile knelt on the grass, his arm wrapped around a little girl with curly hair and scraped knees. The little girl was me. I stared at it like it might disappear. I had to sit down, my heart was too loud and my hands started to shake. I turned it over, hoping for anything to explain. On the back, written in rushed blue ink, were 7 words that knocked the air out of my lungs. "Don't let her end up like him." I read it once, then again. My mom's handwriting, Cheryl's familiar loops and slants, but there was nothing familiar about what she'd written. What did she mean by that? What was wrong with him? The man in the photo looked gentle, safe, like someone who saw me. I wanted to ask her, but I didn't. I knew she wouldn't give me a real answer. She'd call me sensitive or say I was making things up again. So, I sat in my room that night, the photo resting on my nightstand, the words on the back burning holes in my thoughts. I couldn't stop thinking about how young I looked, how tightly he held me, like I mattered, like he wanted to be there. I tried to remember his voice, his laugh, but it was like trying to recall a dream from years ago, the kind that slips through your fingers the moment you open your eyes. I had this strange ache in my chest, a feeling I didn't know how to name. Not sadness, not anger. It was something slower, heavier, like mourning a truth I never got to live. For as long as I could remember, I'd been told he wasn't reliable, that Cheryl had done what she had to do, that Tom was a better fit, more stable, a provider. But what if that wasn't true? What if the story I'd been fed all these years was twisted? What if Cheryl didn't want me to end up like him because she couldn't control him? I lay awake most of the night, the photo turned face up on the pillow beside me. I stared at it every time I rolled over. His face became a lighthouse in the dark. The next morning, I slid the photo into a paperback novel and placed it inside my dresser drawer. Not hidden exactly, but not visible either. Like a secret I wasn't ready to speak aloud. Everything started to feel different after that. I noticed how Tom would speak in absolutes, how Cheryl dismissed questions with tired sighs, how Alexis's stories always made her the hero no matter what happened. I began to listen more closely, not to what they said, but to what they didn't say. The photo stayed with me. I carried it like a question I couldn't stop asking. Who was he really, and what had they been so afraid of? It was the first time I looked at my life and saw cracks I hadn't seen before. Hairline fractures in the foundation I'd been told was solid. And once you see the cracks, you can't pretend the house is safe. Tom made the announcement over dinner like it was already decided. We're going on a family camping trip 3 days in the Catskills, no phones, no distractions. Cheryl nodded like it was the best idea she'd ever heard. Alexis groaned, but only half-heartedly. When Tom mentioned she could get good content out of it, her whole face lit up. I knew then I was outnumbered. I tried to say no. I said I had a shift at the pharmacy. I said I wasn't feeling great. Cheryl cut me off with a sigh. You're always so negative. Alexis wants this. It'll be good for all of us. That word again, family. She said it like a weapon disguised as warmth, like something I wasn't allowed to step away from. So I nodded. I packed my bag. I told myself it was only a few days. I'd done harder things, survived worse. The morning we left, the air was sticky and the sky hung low with heat. Tom loaded the SUV with military precision. Cheryl packed trail mix and wet wipes like she was preparing for war. Alexis filmed everything, the bags going in, the dog barking, my face as I carried the cooler to the trunk. Look at Sarah, the ultimate pack mule. Her followers ate it up. I took the back seat behind Alexis, squeezed between a rolled-up sleeping bag and a box of snacks. Tom drove like he had something to prove. Cheryl played mediator with her sing-song voice that never landed quite right. Alexis held her phone high, talking to her stream like they were family and I was furniture. Heading into the wild with the fam. Pray for me. I heard the ping of likes with every sarcastic line. I tried to make myself small, pressed into the door, eyes on the trees, counting miles. My stomach churned with dread. Tom started on his speeches about resilience, unity, the power of disconnecting. He had a tone, the one he used at dealership events. Motivational, smug, always just shy of a threat. He talked about how this trip would fix things, reset the energy, bring us back together, as if we were ever whole. Cheryl nodded and chirped in agreement. She handed out trail mix like it was Holy Communion. Alexis filmed a mock survival tip about using dry shampoo in the wild. No one asked if I was okay. No one noticed when I didn't laugh. I existed on the edge of their vision. We stopped once for gas. I offered to pay. No one looked at me. Back on the road, Alexis made another post. Camping with chaos. Let's see who cries first. She panned the camera across the car. I turned my face away. The road narrowed as we climbed higher into the mountains. The trees grew thicker, the air cooler. It should have felt peaceful. It didn't. Tom pulled into a clearing with 2 tent spots and a fire pit. This is it. He clapped his hands like we'd won something. Alexis jumped out, still recording. She spun around like she was in a music video. Nature, but make it fashion. Her fans loved it. I stayed in the car a moment longer. My hands rested in my lap, motionless. I didn't want to move. Eventually, I did. I unloaded the gear while Alexis filmed a skit about how she didn't know how to set up a tent. I pitched both tents while Cheryl supervised with her usual detachment. Tom barked orders. Alexis giggled. Cheryl complimented the breeze. I drove the stakes into the ground harder than I needed to. My knuckles ached. No one offered to help. When it came time to cook dinner, Alexis made a show of tasting my chili and pretending to gag. The camera caught her scrunching her nose. 5-star forest dining. Guess which sister brought the flavor of regret? I didn't respond. I stirred the pot. I told myself it was just 3 days. I could endure. Tom sat by the fire like a king overseeing his camp. Cheryl hovered, handing him his drink. Alexis posted about family bonding. Later, when the sun dipped low and the trees cast long shadows, I rinsed dishes by the portable sink. Alexis zoomed in on my backliv again. Our very own forest chef. She works hard so we can laugh harder. Her voice had that fake brightness that always scraped my nerves raw. I said something, quiet. Could you not? Just those words. Tom looked up like I'd insulted God. This trip is a test, he said slowly. Some will pass. He smiled like he already knew I wouldn't. That night, I sat by the fire in silence. Alexis edited videos. Tom talked about the importance of endurance. Cheryl smiled at the flames like they were telling her a secret. I felt like a shadow on the edge of their world, still useful but never included. I should have known something was coming. But part of me still hoped, still wanted to be proven wrong. Tom handed me a plastic grocery bag and pointed toward the tree line. Go grab some firewood, nothing too big. He said it like a chore, like I should have already known what to do. The sun had started to dip low, casting long gold lines through the forest. I stepped off the path and into the shade, crunching over dried leaves, my heart heavy but quiet. I didn't question it. I never did. The woods weren't deep. I could still hear Alexis talking to her phone, her voice echoing like a song I couldn't get out of my head. I picked up sticks and broken branches, tucked them into the bag, and tried not to think too much. I gave myself 15 minutes, enough to seem useful, enough to get back before dark. When I returned, everything was gone. I stood at the edge of the clearing and blinked, like maybe I was seeing it wrong. The tents, the chairs, the food cooler, even the smell of the fire had faded. My hands went slack, the bag fell at my feet. I turned in a slow circle, the silence roaring in my ears. I was alone. My voice cracked when I called out. I said Cheryl's name, Tom's, even Alexis. Nothing answered, not even birds. There was a note taped to the trunk of the tree closest to the fire ring, white paper flapping gently in the breeze. My name was scrawled in black marker. Let's see if she finds her way out. My knees gave before my voice did. I sank to the dirt, the words swimming in my eyes. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't a mistake. They left me. I reached for something, anything to ground myself. My fingers grazed something hard and plastic sticking out of the dirt. A tiny phone charm shaped like a gold star. Alexis's. She used to clip it to her mic when she live streamed. She'd dropped it on purpose, like a signature. I pressed it into my palm until it dug into the skin. My chest felt hollow, like someone had carved out everything soft and left just the shell behind. I tried to stand, but my legs trembled. The trees blurred at the edges. I sat again, my back against the same tree that held the note. I couldn't cry. Not yet. My breath came fast, shallow, sharp. The sky above me faded from gold to blue. Somewhere in the distance, I heard a branch snap and I jerked upright. There was no one there. I had no phone service, no way to call for help. My bag held a few sticks and an empty granola bar wrapper. I had my hoodie, a bottle of water. My mind raced through survival tips I'd half heard on shows Alexis made fun of. Stay calm, don't waste daylight, find a road. But my body wouldn't move. I sat there while the night crept in. The cold touched my skin like a warning. I thought about what I could have done to deserve this. What version of me they had in their heads that made this feel okay. I must have been invisible for so long that they forgot I was human. A raccoon rustled nearby and I startled so hard I dropped the water bottle. I clutched the star charm like it could protect me, like it could explain something. The note stayed pinned to the tree, its edges curled as the wind picked up. I wanted to rip it down, I wanted to scream. Instead, I whispered something I hadn't said in years, please. It wasn't to anyone, just the air, just the trees. Darkness came fast. The forest swallowed the light and every shadow looked like something coming toward me. I wrapped my arms around my knees and tried to stay still. I wasn't afraid of animals. I was afraid they'd come back, laughing, filming, making me into content again. But they didn't. They didn't come back. I stayed up most of the night flinching at sounds, watching the stars blink through the trees. I counted them. It kept me from falling apart. My thoughts circled the same question. If I vanished, would they even notice? Would they tell people I ran off, that I couldn't handle a little camping? I rocked slowly on the ground, whispering stories to myself. Anything to stay sane. I thought about the man in the photo, the way he held me. Maybe he would have come back for me. When dawn broke, my face was stiff with dried tears I didn't remember shedding. My limbs were sore, my throat dry, but I was still there, alive. And I knew then, no one was coming to get me. I would have to walk myself out. The sun rose pale and tired, like it didn't want to face the day either. I stood slowly, my body aching from sleeping on cold dirt, my throat rough with thirst. The world was quiet except for the whisper of leaves and the faint rustle of morning wind. I didn't know which direction led to a road, so I guessed. I looked for breaks in the tree line, listened for any sign of movement. I walked with the bottle cradled to my chest, rationing every sip. Hunger throbbed behind my ribs, but thirst was sharper. I tried not to think about food. I focused on moving forward. The forest grew thinner after what felt like hours. The ground flattened and I spotted a stretch of gravel through the trees. When I stepped onto the shoulder of the road, my knees almost gave out. It was empty. Just trees on both sides and a strip of gray curling into the horizon. But it was something. A direction? A maybe. I started walking, one step then another. I counted them. I told myself stories in my head just to keep going. Eventually, the sound of an engine broke the silence. I turned slowly, unsure if I should wave or hide. It was a truck. Big, rust-colored, pulling a trailer stacked with lumber. I lifted my hand halfway, not a wave, more like a question. The truck slowed. The driver leaned out squinting, then pulled over. He looked about 50, weathered face, soft eyes. He didn't ask too many questions, just offered a bottle of water and asked if I was lost. I nodded, not exactly a lie. He told me his name was Ray, said I looked like I'd been through something. I said I had. He offered to take me into town, get me something to eat. I hesitated. He didn't push. So I climbed into the cab holding the water like it was made of gold. I drank it too fast, then coughed so hard my eyes watered. Ray didn't laugh. He handed me a napkin and turned the radio low. We didn't talk much. I liked that. His silence felt gentle, not like the kind I'd grown up with. He drove me to a diner just off the main road, bought me eggs and toast and didn't sit too close. When I tried to pay, he waved me off and said he had a daughter my age. That kindness felt like a miracle. It cracked something open inside me. I ate slowly, letting each bite settle, grounding myself. Afterward, he gave me $20 and directions to the nearest bus stop. I thanked him more times than I could count. He said to take care of myself. I watched his truck disappear down the road. Then I stood there for a long time, just breathing. The thought of going home made my stomach twist. Back to Cheryl, to Tom, to Alexis, back to silence and pretend smiles and cameras catching me at my lowest. I couldn't do it, not again. So I sat on the bench at the bus stop and pulled out the photo I'd tucked in my bag. The one of me and the man with the warm smile. My father. I traced the edge of the paper with my thumb. That note on the back, "Don't let her end up like him." It didn't scare me anymore. It made me curious. Who had he really been? What had Cheryl been so afraid of? I didn't want revenge. I didn't want an apology. I wanted to know who I came from. What parts of me had been buried in stories I wasn't allowed to hear. So when the bus came, I climbed on. I asked the driver how far it went and where I could transfer. I didn't know exactly where I was going, just that I wasn't going back. And for the first time in years, that felt like enough. Robin opened the door before I knocked. She looked older than I remembered, but her face softened when she saw me. No questions. Just open arms and the smell of lavender and old books. Her cabin sat at the edge of a lake surrounded by pine trees and silence. Cats wandered between rooms like they owned the place. A wood-burning stove clicked gently in the corner and every chair had a blanket draped over it. She made me tea without asking. I sat on the couch while one of the cats climbed into my lap. It purred like I belonged there. Robin didn't press. She let me talk when I was ready. I told her about the woods, the note, the silence. She closed her eyes for a moment, then squeezed my hand. She said she always suspected something. Cheryl never liked sharing, not attention, not love, not even truth. I stayed for the night, then the next. She offered me the spare room without ceremony. I made the bed and opened the windows. The air smelled like pine and safety. In the mornings, I helped her in the garden. In the afternoons, I napped with a cat on my chest. Slowly, the knots inside me began to loosen. One rainy day, she asked if I wanted to see something. She led me to the attic. We moved aside boxes and dusted off a trunk with my grandmother's initials carved into the lid. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to me. I opened the first one with shaking hands. The handwriting was careful. My grandmother wrote about the day I was born, about how she had held me in the hospital and whispered promises into my ear. She'd sent a card for every birthday, wrote about how she hoped I was painting, said she'd opened a trust fund for me after my father died, said she missed me, loved me. I read until my eyes burned. Robin sat beside me, silent, a steady presence. She said the letters were meant to be given to me when I turned 18. Cheryl had refused to pass them on, said I didn't want reminders of the past, said it would only confuse me. Robin had believed her, but now she didn't. I dug through the trunk and found an envelope marked legal. Inside were bank statements. The trust fund had existed, had been transferred. Closed by Cheryl and Tom a month after my 13th birthday. The money was gone, stolen in pieces over the years. I'd been told we couldn't afford art classes, that we were struggling. While they used what was mine to buy upgrades and vacations, I never went on. My hands trembled, not from shock, from recognition. It made too much sense. Robin apologized like it was her fault. I told her it wasn't. I didn't blame her. I just needed to know it wasn't all in my head. I spent that night with the letters spread around me like a blanket. I read them over and over. I cried without trying to stop it. I remembered being 9 and asking why I never got mail. Cheryl said only important people got letters. I believed her. Now I knew better. I wasn't unwanted. I was kept hidden, on purpose, from people who had loved me. The betrayal sank in deep. But underneath it, something new began to grow. Not rage, not revenge. Something steadier, the shape of myself solid and whole, separate from the lies. I pulled out my old sketchbook and filled a page with rough lines and soft edges. My hand shook at first, then steadied. The girl I drew looked like me, but stronger. She stood in the center of the frame, no longer in the background. Robin watched from the doorway and said it looked like someone finding their way back. I nodded. Because I was? I started working at the general store 2 towns over, stocking shelves, running the register, taking inventory with a pen that always ran out of ink. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. People knew my name after a few weeks. They asked how my day was. One old man brought me apples from his orchard every Thursday. I kept them in a basket by the window and used them to make pie for Robin. I woke up early, made tea, walked by the lake before the sun got too high. My breath felt different, deeper, like my lungs had room again. Robin let me turn the garage into a studio, just a folding table, a lamp, and a few worn brushes at first. But it was mine. I painted late into the night with music low and the door cracked open. The more I painted, the less I flinched when I thought of the past. My lines grew bolder, my colors warmed. I stopped apologizing for taking up space. That's when I met Travis. He came into the store looking for brake fluid and left with a bag of licorice and a conversation about art. He asked questions without pressing, listened like every word mattered. We crossed paths again at the farmer's market, then at the library, then on a cold Tuesday when his truck broke down outside Robin's driveway. After that, he never really left. He worked as a freelance investigator, small-town fraud cases, misused grants, fake charities. He said people underestimated how much harm can hide in paperwork. One afternoon, he mentioned something odd about a local fundraiser run by a woman named Carla. I remembered her. She'd come into the store once a week in designer sunglasses and talk like everyone was lucky just to know her. Travis asked if I wanted to help. I hesitated, then said yes. We spent nights going through public records. I made charts, highlighted dates, found names that appeared too often in the wrong places. It felt good to notice things, to connect dots. The town had trusted Carla for years. She ran a program that claimed to help low-income families with utilities. But most of the money never left her accounts. Travis gathered the evidence. I wrote the summary. We turned it in together. Carla was arrested 2 weeks later. I watched the news clip from the back of the store, hands wrapped around a mug of tea. My name wasn't in the story, but I knew what I'd done. After that, people looked at me differently, not with pity, with respect. I wasn't just the quiet girl from the woods anymore. I started selling small prints at the farmer's market, framed sketches of the lake, the trees, the faces of people I'd met. They sold slowly, then all at once. A woman from the local paper wrote a piece about my art. She called it Healing on Canvas. I clipped it and taped it above my desk. Travis built me better shelves in the studio, brought me coffee when I forgot to eat. He asked if I wanted to try dinner at his place one night. I said yes, then never left. I still kept to myself more than most, but I laughed easier, slept deeper, painted like I meant it. Some nights I'd walk by the lake alone and think about that note on the tree. Let's see if she finds her way out. I smiled every time, because I had. Not just out of the woods, but out of the lie they'd tried to make my whole life. The message came through Robin. Cheryl had called her landline, left a shaky voicemail asking to meet. She said it was urgent, said the family was falling apart without me. I picked the diner in the next town over, neutral ground, bright lights, witnesses. They were already seated when I walked in. Cheryl wore too much perfume. Tom had a cane he didn't need. Alexis held her phone like a shield. I sat across from them without saying a word. They looked smaller than I remembered. Not weaker, just reduced. Cheryl started with tears, said they missed me, said they'd made a mistake. Tom said things had gotten out of hand, that it was supposed to be a reset, a wake-up call. He talked like it had been a bad weekend, not abandonment. Alexis didn't speak at first, just stared at her phone. When she finally looked up, her voice was flat, said she'd lost followers after what happened, asked if I was happy now. I didn't answer. I let the silence stretch until it made them fidget. Cheryl leaned in, said they'd heard about the trust fund, that they'd run into some hard times, that families should help each other. I watched her mouth move and felt nothing, not rage, not sadness, just a clean, sharp stillness. Then the bell above the door rang. Travis walked in with an older woman I hadn't seen in years. Mrs. Leary. She used to work at the bank, used to bring cookies to the store on Saturdays. She walked straight to our table and set down a folder. Inside were copies of the fund's transactions, dates, signatures, transfers, notes from meetings Cheryl had attended under a fake name. Mrs. Leary said she'd kept quiet out of fear, but she couldn't anymore. She looked at me and said, I deserve to know. Cheryl's face turned to stone. Tom muttered something about privacy. Alexis finally looked shaken. I closed the folder, looked each of them in the eye. Then I spoke, slowly, clearly. I said I wasn't their burden anymore, that they didn't get to rewrite what they did, that leaving me in the woods had been the kindest thing they'd ever done because it forced me to find the truth. Cheryl reached for my hand. I pulled it back. I told them I didn't owe them forgiveness. That family isn't just blood, it's choice, and I chose not to carry them with me. Tom tried to stand but wobbled. Alexis blinked hard, her phone forgotten. I stood, straightened my coat, looked around the diner where people had paused mid-bite to listen. Then I walked out. The cold air hit my face like freedom. Travis opened the truck door. I climbed in and didn't look back. The studio sits at the edge of the property now, just beyond the birch trees. White walls, wide windows, and shelves lined with brushes. I finally stopped apologizing for buying. It smells like paint and pine and home. I wake up before sunrise most days, make coffee, sit on the porch while the sky turns from gray to gold. Travis comes out barefoot, still half asleep, and we watch the birds move through the branches, like they've got places to be. We got married last fall, just before the leaves turned. Small ceremony, a few friends, a lot of laughter and pie instead of cake. I wore boots under my dress and he cried through half the vows. The money from the trust went into building the studio and into starting something I needed when I was younger. A small fund for girls like me, girls who've been silenced or forgotten or told they don't matter. Every month we pick a few letters, we send supplies, cover class fees. Sometimes it's not even about the art. Sometimes it's just knowing someone out there sees them. I went back to the forest once, just once. Travis drove me most of the way, then waited at a diner with a paperback and pie. I walked the last half-mile alone. The trees looked smaller. The clearing was still there, but the fire pit was overgrown. No sign of tents, no sign of me. I brought one thing with me, the note. The original, creased and smudged, still sharp around the edges. I read it one last time. Let's see if she finds her way out. Then I folded it, tucked it into a hollow in the tree trunk, and walked away. The sea is only an hour west. Some weekends we drive there, windows down, radio low. I sit in the sand with my sketchbook and draw whatever comes. Waves, birds, sometimes just lines. But last week I drew something different. A woman standing in a clearing, tall and quiet and unafraid. No bags, no shadows, just her, looking forward. I signed my name at the bottom, not small, not hidden, just mine,